Real quick before we do this, I had a friend who went by the name Symbiote. That was his social media tag, and he often referred to it, in real life. I don't know how much of a Spider-Man fan that he was, in a traditional sense, but he definitely could dig the symbiote. He recently passed, unfortunately, and I don't know how he would have felt about this movie. I hope he would have loved it, the way that I did, the way that we did. So, I the people watching this don't know who he is, but it being a Spider-Man movie, I want to just give him a quick shout out. So here's to Chris McDuffie. You are missed. I've been telling people for like months and months and months that this movie was either going to be super amazing or it was going to be absolutely like garbage, because I knew that this was going to be an event movie, and those things are always one of those two, because a lot of it rides on the hype of everything that they're throwing in there for the sake of fan service. So I did the thing that I hate. I kind of had a foot in both lanes, but if you had asked me what side I would have been on, like what I thought was more likely, I would have said chances were better that this movie was going to fail. Not financially, of course. The movie's going to make billions of dollars, but I figured, like, as an actual theater going experience, it was going to be more on the whack side. Oh my goodness, it wasn't. MCU Tom Holland Spider Man finally had an outing where he was the Spider Man that I love. This movie did not start the way that I kind of wanted it to start, and by that I mean that the consequences didn't seem like they were going to be sticking. The stakes didn't seem to be high the way that I hoped they would be, considering how the last movie ended. It was a whole bunch of humor, and I was getting really nervous. I was getting super nervous because, like, I don't like how prevalent MCU humor is in their movies. I feel like it undercuts the drama way too much, and it looked like we were on that path. And for a while, we were. Even when villains start showing up, it was still being played for laughs a little bit, and it wasn't like really working for me. But there's a turning point in the movie where something catastrophic happens, and we are officially in like serious survival mode. And when that happened, that's when the movie turned into something else for me. It turned into what I like about superhero movies. It turned into what I like about Spider-Man specifically. It was reminding you that Spider-Man does not have an easy life. He's never had an easy life. He always has to walk that line between like tragedy of responsibility and trying to live right and do the right thing always costs him something. And up until then, I felt like the MCU Spider-Man, none of his decisions really cost him anything, like nothing severe. And in this movie, all of that goes out the window. As for the future, who knows? They might retcon this entire thing. They might take it all back. Um, but if they let this stand, what they have done with this movie, oh, that's a game changer. That's a bolder decision than any of the franchises that came before. And that's what I was talking about in earlier videos where I said that I feel like MCU Spider-Man just isn't bold. Oh yeah, this movie went in some bold directions. Tom Holland grew up in this movie. Peter Parker finally grew up. We're not sitting around the lunchroom anymore, like cracking jokes and whatnot. I mean, there's some of that, but there are some monumental things going on that we have to deal with it. There are like moral dilemmas in this movie, like real, not like there's a party over there and I want to know that like I should swing in to save my reputation or blah blah, or maybe I shouldn't because I shouldn't abuse Spider-Man. Now that's fun at the start because he is a kid, but you gotta move past that eventually. And in this movie, the moral questions are a lot heavier. For once, the supporting cast worked for me. I actually liked Ned and Michelle and Aunt May in these movies. I haven't up until this point. I've always thought Michelle was way too edgy. I always thought Ned was way too goofy, and I thought Aunt May was way too milfy. Aunt May has relevance like you cannot pull her out of this movie and have it go down the same way, which is what Aunt May is always supposed to be, and I'm so glad she finally was in this movie. Michelle started showing some feeling, like they were getting into her psyche, and it's this kind of philosophy that you've heard before, but it's cutting through a lot of that to see like a really caring individual underneath. She's not afraid to feel something for Peter Parker, which goes a long way in me rooting for their relationship, because you feel like that she genuinely has feelings for him. We know he genuinely has feelings for her, but it finally felt uh, symbiotic in a way that it hadn't felt up until this point. Ned, I mean, he's still Ned, but he had something to do, and he had something to do in a manner in which he didn't feel like somebody else could do it. Like him being the guy in the chair never sat well with me, because Peter Parker is a smart guy, he's a genius, so I always felt like they're dumbing down Peter for the sake of giving Ned relevance. But Ned in this movie does things that only Ned can do, and that made it all feel like a more well-oiled machine. Does this movie have the villain problem? I mentioned that Spider-Man 3 had the villain problem. I mentioned that Amazing Spider-Man 2 had the villain problem. And I mentioned my hesitancy about this movie because I was afraid that it would have the villain problem. Well, that depends on how you define the villain problem. If you define it strictly as too many for everyone to get relevancy, then yes, this movie has the villain problem. There are two characters in particular who kind of get regulated to background characters, and their motivations are super undercooked, but there's a lot going on. Now, if you define it more as, does it have a villain problem in the sense that there are characters who are in it that bog the movie down because of the fact that they're so underserviced? No, I don't think this movie has that problem. I think that it gives you enough meat with enough of the characters that the couple that do fall behind and they're just kind of there for the sake of action and for the sake of fighting, it doesn't make the movie, like the movie doesn't feel like it's longer than it has to be because we just felt like throwing them in there. There are no unnecessary action sequences just for them to get their spotlight or anything like that. It doesn't take away from anything. I loved seeing Alfred Molina back as Doc Ock. He was cool. I had watched Spider-Man 2 right before I went to go see the movie, and it was like picking up right from the end of that movie. He just kind of shows up. Willem Dafoe was great. Willem Dafoe, I would dare say, was actually better in this movie than he was in the original Spider-Man movie. And not that he was bad in the original Spider-Man movie. I think just what they did with him in this movie. When you talk about Green Goblin, I said that he defined Green Goblin back then. And then he redefined Green Goblin in this movie. Willem Dafoe is just the guy for this character. He just knows how to play him. And when it comes time to reinvent him for the modern age, he knows how to do that too. Oh my goodness, he knocked it out of the park. Alfred Molina knocked it out of the park. I'm glad Jamie Foxx got a redo, because I didn't think he was bad as Electro. I just think Electro was written poorly in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And in this movie, his motivation is still like pretty much the same, but it's less goofy. Should I talk about the action? We know MCU knows how to make action. We know MCU knows how to make exciting action with Spider-Man specifically. I never thought the action was a problem in these movies. I think the stunt work and the choreography and the web slinging and the creative ways to use powers and all of that, it's always worked, and it works well in this movie. As an ensemble movie, this movie works. It's one of those things, it's like you know, but you don't know, so I can't tell you. There are corrections to this movie, from the past. This movie makes corrections. There are improvements. There is respect paid to legacies. Like, this movie understands, it doesn't just sit there and claim to be a fantastic Spider-Man movie all on its own. It understands that the greatness of this movie is built on the blocks of what has come before it, and it acts as such. It pays tribute, it pays homage, it pays all sorts of tithe and offering. Like, it pays its respects to everything that comes before, and nobody feels left out. If you are a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which you probably are in the minority if you are, this movie doesn't crap on you for it. If you love Sam Raimi, this movie, reconfirms that you had every right to love those movies. If you like MCU Spider-Man, this movie justifies that, and it makes for a really compelling, really emotional experience. There's anger, there's hatred, there's vengeance, there's sympathy, there's forgiveness, there's hope, there's despair, there's, as a not super huge Spider-Man fan, is absolutely the movie that I'm glad I was a fan enough to watch Spider-Man over the years, because there's so much payoff. There's so much reward for being, even the most casual Spider-Man fans. If you have watched the movies, you will be rewarded in this movie. Hearing callbacks to themes from other movies, it just makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It gives you goosebumps because I haven't heard this in such a long time, and it blends so seamlessly. There's so much joy in this movie. There are times where Spider-Man is swinging and he is just having fun, and you can tell it's showing Peter Parker's genius, like real genius, and not in a hand-me-down way. There's no Tony Stark needs to get you out of this. There's no Doctor Strange needs to get you. Peter Parker has to get himself out of this problem. Every Spider-Man goes through that revenge crucible, and Peter Parker in the MCU at that point, Tom Holland never had to go through that arc on screen. We finally get to see him struggle with the idea of getting revenge. I have the ability to do it. Am I actually gonna go take it? No two ways about it. I love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. Bravo MCU, bravo Kevin Feige, bravo whoever directed this thing, something Watts. I'm sorry, I didn't look up your name. Bravo Tom Holland, bravo Zendaya, bravo other actors who were in it, Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe. Good job. You got it done. If you liked listening to me ramble about this movie for however long this video is, leave a comment, subscribe if you would like to, share the video, could really appreciate it, and I'll be back to talk about more nerd stuff. Thank God Tom Holland has finally been validated. Alright, y'all. Later.